Does it feel a little different in the air to you at all?
Just feel happier.
Well, that's one of us. It is astronomical fall, which is when...
It's fall, y'all.
It's fall, y'all, officially. All the falls that it could be. Meteorological, astronomical, we're there. And this is when I feel like things start to change for real. Meteorological fall, it's still hot.
It's still very hot. By the way, meteorological fall, that's September 1st. So we've been there for a good minute. It actually felt like fall when we started meteorological fall. Now that we're in astronomical fall, things are a little bit different. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to break it all down for you. It's Weather Channel Live. Molly McCollum and Felicia Combs here to map it out for you. And we've got a lot to talk about in the weather world today, inclling some severe storms in Bermuda. So we will take that. You know, even when the storm is passing to the west and not necessarily making a direct landfall, if it's getting close to you from the west, you're getting a little bit more of those impacts. The east side of the storms, the dirty side of the storm. So if you had to pick a hurricane to pass this close, it would probably be exactly how Gabrielle's passing Bermuda.
But it's not just Gabrielle in the Atlantic. We now have two additional areas that we're watching. Both of those could be coming depressions. We'll get to those in a minute. By the way, Gabrielle is now a Category 3 hurricane.
Yeah,
rapid intensification.
Took the words out of your mouth. Rapid intensification. And, you know, this was not part of the forecast initially. It was supposed to strengthen, but the rapid intensification was surprising.
And the structure, I mean, I'll tell you, yesterday, looking at this looked like a tropical storm that was starting to consolidate, maybe, you know, no longer battling the shear and the dry air, but things really accelerated through the overnight hours.
I mean, Gabrielle has looked kind of rough for its entire lifespan up until the last 12, 24 hours or so. And really that its structure now looks, you don't want to say fantastic, but in terms of how a storm should be structured. And that's why you're seeing some more implications for Bermuda now. Right.
And as Felicia mentioned, you know, the fact that this is passing east of Bermuda is really doing us a lot of favors. So here's the track for Hurricane Gabrielle, eventually taking it further away from Bermuda into the northern part of the Atlantic.
I know a lot of eyes on what's coming up next, though. If you've been on social media at all, you've been seeing the
different... I know what you've seen.
We know what you've seen, the different forecasts. Still too far out to say anything, but we've got one area with a high chance of development in the next 7 days, kind of in this region just to the north and east of the Leeward Islands.
And then we have an additional area that has a 50% chance of development over the next 7 days. So we want to look at the basin as a whole, and so we can continue to watch Gabrielle. But really, after today, that moves into the northern Atlantic, and these two are the next two players in the game.
So you can see it here, one area to watch that has a higher chance of development, looking like it's staying farther out to sea. But you'll notice the area of low-level spin that the European model is wanting to pick up on here, kind of near the Bahamas. This is just one long-range model's forecast, and you'll notice still disorganized, though, by tropical standards as we head into early next week.
And by the way, Bermuda may have to watch one of those again by the time we get to the weekend. So here we go. There's Gabrielle, and here's the next two areas. This is the American model, by the way, really favoring the one that is farther to the west.
Yeah.
And I know that's a quite scary solution, but we have a lot of time to watch this one.
That's right. This forecast will continue to change. I think that's what I remember the most, Molly, when I remember being in Asheville for Helene, was the amount of people who were coming up to us and saying, you know, can we connect your Starlink, or do you have any information for us? We have no information. The way that entire region was just cut off from the outside world was just like something I've never seen before.
And I remember stories of people that were in some of these smaller communities in Western North Carolina that walked miles, miles out of, you know, through the damage and everything, out of changed landscape, basically, just so they could get in contact with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, and they were looking for their neighbors. A lot of some of the mountain towns, you know, completely washed away in some ways. So if you were trying to get out of that and maybe you couldn't use the road, even, you know, it was such a desperate situation. And we knew it would be bad. We knew the forecast, but we just didn't know it would be this bad.
And this is the recap, the radar recap, as we watch not only Helene make landfall there in Florida, but of course, it wasn't just Helene in Western North Carolina. There was something called a predecessor event where we had heavy rain ahead of time, and that just, you know, Helene came in, and that's when it just became devastating.
Yeah, we had record rainfall the previous 2 days leading up to Helene. I actually drove from Atlanta up to Asheville, and it rained on me the whole time that I drove there. And so then to add, you know, the rain from Helene, the winds from Helene, and then on top of the rain we already saw, it was just a catastrophic event.
And we also saw extremely heavy rain in other areas too, but of course you had the terrain, you really just had the focus of all of these factors coming together in western North Carolina that made things so bad.
Some of the rainfall rates now, when you talk about a tropical system, Helene was still moving pretty quickly when it made landfall and was kind of moving through the panhandle of Florida. But still, when you're talking about over nearly 16 inches of rainfall, that's a lot of rain. And then it slows down a little bit and it adds on to the topography, just draining that rain out.
And then you look at western North Carolina, even parts of northern South Carolina there, where now you are looking at 18, 24 inches of rain. I mean, it was way too much for this kind of terrain to handle, and that top amount there, over 30 inches of rain.
Of course, that's all running into the same rivers, creeks, and streams, and been being pulled down in elevation that eventually resulted in the flooding like this at the French Broad River. I will tell you that initial forecasts were, around 20 feet or so. And those were going to be catastrophic. So getting up to nearly 25 there on the French Broad and the Swannanoa up over 26 feet. No one thought it would be that bad.
And that's past the previous record. The previous record set just over 20 feet.
Yeah, so I mean, just absolute catastrophic damage, and that's why you see when it goes past records like that. We had crews, of course, spread out covering all of the areas that are going to be impacted by Helene. And the big concern along the coast, Molly, was the storm surge and the wind coming from this storm.
And that was despite the fact that, we were expecting Helene to make landfall in the Big Bend of Florida, where it eventually did. But all along the coastline, we were concerned about the surge, despite the fact that we weren't going to see a landfall there. Yeah. And it really even overperformed in some areas like, say, St. Pete, where you had 12 people that died from surge.
Yeah, a terrible situation with that. Coming along with the wind, you can see some of the top wind reports, but some of the surge reports broke records.
Like in areas, St. Pete and parts of Tampa Bay. And then, of course, you had up towards Cedar Key, which was closer. That's where Mike Bettis was. And that's where, you were closer to some of that push of water. But I think, because I was in Sarasota, and I want to show you some video from, this was actually the morning before Helene hit. And this is just some street flooding. This is as Helene had not even become parallel to Sarasota yet. Right. And it was after it moved to the north that all of the surge came into areas like Sarasota Bay. Our hotel was, a half a mile from the bay.
Yeah.
And at one point we were completely surrounded by water.
I mean, that's what we talk about when we say you can't just look at the cone, right?
Right.
You're going to have impacts and implications far outside of the cone. And storm surge is a product of, one, the storm size and its strength and things like that, but your wind direction. So it can be well after the storm eye has passed you that you start to see those waters come up.
And after the storm passed, and I drove from Sarasota up to the St. Pete area, and just seeing home after home that had been inundated by water. Yeah, and it was barely anybody that lived next to the water escaped some kind of water damage.
Yeah, boats displaced. I remember seeing boats, scattered about inland where they shouldn't be.
Way inland.
Of course, we're focused on Helene right now, but then it wasn't very long after this that we had to look at Milton for those same areas, and it was just a 1-2 punch.
So there's some of the peak surge, but we even had some surge amounts here on the Atlantic as well.
It just goes to show you how large and impactful the wind field of Helene was along the northern Gulf Coast as well. And typically, you think of the west side of the storm to maybe not cause you as many issues, but it's all about where's that wind coming in from.
And then, of course, once it moved inland, then you had all of the problems with the wind and the rainfall continuing well inland.
Yeah. Well, we're bringing you special reports all week, those temperatures. And Molly, as we head into now astronomical fall, of course, we've already been in meteorological fall, heading into astronomical fall. I do feel like this is when we really start to feel that page turn.
We do. I don't think not quite yet this week for a lot of us. Still a lot of summer temperatures, which will keep Felicia very happy, at least in the short term, and people like me who love fall. A little bit sad that we aren't seeing those temperatures that we had just a couple of weeks ago. But we've been in meteorological fall for a couple of weeks now. That starts on September 1st. It starts on September 1st every single year. It's mainly for record keeping, and astronomical fall, that can vary by a couple of days, but this year it is today, September 22nd. So let's talk about the seasons for a minute, because we've already seen the daylight hours shrinking a little bit. And of course, that's part of the reason that the leaves are starting to change color. But we get into winter time now. The northern hemisphere receives a lot less direct sunlight. You've got the cooler temperatures and the lower sun angle. But then as we get back into into spring, we start to see more of that direct sunlight. We start to see the leaves back on the trees, the warmer temperatures. And of course, here we go with all of the seasons. If this was a map, if you were like at a mall, this would say you are here, fall, September 22nd. And of course, we've got a long way to go with the fall season before we get to winter. Felicia, that should make you happy.
Yeah, you know,